Welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Julia Shaver. I'm the membership manager at the museum, and I'm delighted to introduce tonight's program. We're joined tonight by Matthew Skic, who's our curator of exhibitions, who will give us a sneak peek at some of the amazing artifacts that will be in the upcoming exhibition at the museum, Liberty, Don Troiani's Paintings of the Revolutionary War. This exciting exhibition opens with a members-only preview on Friday, October 15th. You can reserve your spot on our website under the events page. And if you have any issues registering or if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I'll drop my contact info in the chat. And thank you all so much for supporting the museum through membership. It really is one of the best ways to support everything we do here at the museum. And I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to the members of the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts who are joining us this evening as well. All right, let's go ahead and get started. If you have any questions during the program, please feel free to submit them in the chat. And over to you, Matt.
Good evening, everyone. As Julia said, my name is Matthew Skic. I'm the curator of exhibitions here at the Museum of the American Revolution. And I'm delighted to also serve as the lead curator of this upcoming exhibition, Liberty, Don Troiani's Paintings of the Revolutionary War. Some of you that are part of this program this evening might be familiar with the name Don Troiani and maybe be familiar with his artwork. Don Troiani is a contemporary artist. He's a living artist who's based in Southbury, Connecticut, and he's been painting since the 1960s, focusing on recreating historical battle scenes and what soldiers look like from America's wars. He's perhaps most famous for his paintings of the Civil War that you can see in his books and on interpretive signage at the National Park Service battlefields around the country. But perhaps his greatest interest right now is painting the Revolutionary War and recreating what the war actually looked like. And his research process is based on studying primary sources, artifacts, material culture. And he's a collector himself. He collects artifacts from the periods that he paints in order to understand more about that time period. And that's something we're going to be discussing a bit tonight. The exhibit itself will feature 46 of Don Troiani's original paintings, alongside about 20 artifacts from his collection and dozens of artifacts from the museum's collection and other private collectors and institutions. The exhibit will be 5,000 square feet on our first floor special exhibits gallery, Patriots Gallery, and be opening in mid-October. And accompanying this exhibit is a catalog that will feature all of the artifacts and paintings included in the exhibit. And tonight we're going to take a look at some of those artifacts on loan to us from Don Troiani. And I'm just going to switch slides here to the next one to look at a closer look at one of the paintings that Don Troiani has included in the exhibit. Troiani's paintings and the ones that will be included in the exhibit range in detail and range in geography. So here on screen, we're looking at a painting of the Battle of Princeton, for example, January 3rd, 1777, showing Washington, General Washington leading a charge across farm fields at Princeton, just outside of town. Don Troiani's paintings incorporate really amazing details. And you can see one on the easel here in 2011, Don Troiani painting a scene of Margaret Corbin, who was wounded at the Battle of Fort Washington and later received a pension for her service at this battle in 1776. Other paintings that Don has painted show the Battle of Oriskany, part of the Grand Saratoga campaign, which concluded in the surrender of British General John Burgoyne's army in October of 1777. But this Battle of Oriskany was fought in the woods of upstate New York, pitting members of the Haudenosaunee, the members of the Oneida Nation, the Cayuga, Mohawk, and Seneca, fighting against each other on opposite sides the Oneida supporting the United States and other nations of the Confederacy supporting the British and their loyalist followers. Paintings will also range to the Southern campaigns, the battles of Kings Mountain and Guilford Courthouse. If you look at a painting like this one, the Battle of Monmouth, one of the last grand battles in the North, June 28, 1778, showing Mary Hayes, who later became known as Molly Pitcher, tending to a cannon after her husband had been wounded. And one of the final paintings that you'll see in the exhibit is the grand surrender of General Cornwallis's army at Yorktown on October 19th, 1781. This is one of Don Troiani's latest paintings, and this will be the first time people will be able to see the original canvas in person when it's on display here at the Museum of the American Revolution. So I hope this gives you a sense of Don Troiani's artwork. Like I said, you'll be able to see 46 original works by Don Troiani. And we're going to continue on into our main portion of our program this evening, which is looking at original artifacts from Don Troiani's collection that we have on loan. So let's jump right into it. All right. So the first thing I wanted to talk about this evening is some of the British material culture that we have on loan from Don Troiani. And here we have on display here on the table an original British grenadier cap, bearskin grenadier cap. You can see here, really an iconic artifact from the Revolutionary War. And you can see as in this detail shot a motto at the top of this plate here. It says, "Nec aspera terrent." That's Latin for "not afraid of difficulties." You see also on this metal front plate here, GR for Georgius Rex, King, which stands for King George in Latin. You see a crowned lion and a lion over top of a crown. These are all symbols of the British Grenadiers and showing that who they fought for, King George III. And this was a relatively new type of cap that the British Army was wearing in the early 1770s. This type of cap was regulated by a new uniform warrant or regulations that the British Army had adopted in 1768, establishing that bearskin, tall grenadier caps would be worn by these elite troops of the British Army. Previous to wearing bearskin caps, the British Grenadiers wore cloth or wool grenadier caps with different devices and mottos and insignia of their regiments, and also the king who they fought for. This bearskin grenadier cap is an extremely rare example to survive from the period. As you can see, it's made of delicate materials. It's made of natural material, bearskin in this case. Other European nations also wore bearskin grenadier caps that looked similar. The front plate of this grenadier cap is lacquered, also known as japanning, and you can see some of the bear fur is actually kind of lost, but it's amazing that it survives. And when you see this on display in the exhibit, you'll be able to see 360-degree view of this cap all around, and get a sense of its size. And a surprising note about these caps is that they look pretty rigid and heavy, but they're actually pretty lightweight. These caps were also meant to be folded up and stored in a soldier's pack or a specific bag when they were not needed, or a soldier would be wearing a different hat, be it a cocked hat, or which is the typical hat you see on soldiers of the period, or a forage cap or fatigue cap, which was made out of wool. But in many cases, these caps are very much part of the esprit de corps, or the pride of being in the British Grenadiers. The British Grenadiers were supposed to be the tallest, strongest men of the army. And these caps added to their height, added to their appearance on the battlefield as a formidable foe for their enemy. And they were known as a flank company as part of a British regiment, along with a light infantry company. And those were the two elite companies of a regiment of the British Army that were to defend the flanks or the ends or the sides of a British regiment. Their name, grenadiers, comes from the fact that they used to throw grenades and be armed with grenades, which were in the 18th century just iron balls filled with gunpowder with a fuse that you would light and throw at an enemy fortification or something like that. These grenadiers were typically not carrying grenades on the battlefields in America. They were armed with muskets and bayonets and swords, but they were still wearing these grenadier caps. And in some cases, we have written accounts that grenadiers who may not have been wearing their caps, they were stored away in their bags as they marched into battle. Their officers would call on them to put on your caps, my brave grenadiers, and charge forward in battle. So these are so much an icon of the British Army back then. And also when we think about how the British Army appears in popular representations in Hollywood, we often see the British Grenadier cap as a symbol of the British Army. So a really amazing example here. Shows the high quality of Don Troiani's collection. And you can see that Don has used some of these artifacts in his paintings. So, you'll see grenadier caps worn by soldiers in the paintings that Don has done over the years. And Don can get the details right about his depictions by looking and examining an original cap from his collection. All right, let's move on to something else. Another natural material here, horn. And I'm just going to take a closer look at this one. This is a powder horn here. This powder horn was carved in 1775. And this particular one belonged to a New Hampshire soldier whose name is visible just right here, Micah Hoyt, H-O-I-T. This powder horn, as I said, was carved in 1775 during what is known as the Siege of Boston, when the British Army was encircled in Boston by the brand new Continental Army, made up largely of New Englanders with support soldiers coming up from Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. Micah Hoyt was one of those New Englanders that participated in the Siege of Boston. And he later went on to serve during the Saratoga campaign in a New Hampshire regiment of the Continental Army and fought at the major battles of that campaign, including Hubbardton and Freeman's Farm and Bemis Heights. Now his regiment took some heavy casualties during those battles, and Hoyt was an officer in that regiment and was by the middle of the campaign, he's commanding his company. And so Hoyt was probably carrying this horn too when he was serving during the Saratoga campaign. And when you look at it closely, you can see there's sort of whimsical decorations carved into it. Details like right by my fingers here, a huntsman firing a hunting weapon, maybe a fowling piece. You can see cannons and deer. These powder horns are really amazing pieces of folk art. You can see some ships on this side here. And when you get a chance to see them up close and get a sense of their size and shape, you can see how they almost were hugging the hip as they were suspended from a shoulder strap worn by a soldier or officer like Lieutenant Hoyt here. And this one's actually dated September the 8th, 1775 there. And it's noted at Brookline, which is one of the forts surrounding Boston in 1775. So really an amazing, beautiful condition powder horn here that will be on display. Another piece of British material culture or artifact is this canteen here. It doesn't look like too much, but this is another rare survivor. Now, canteens were very much a everyday use object by soldiers of the period. Every soldier really needed a canteen. And canteens varied in size and shape, but pretty much the standard issue for the British Army was a tin canteen like this one. The canteen is made of tin, but it's not only tin. It's not 100% tin. This is actually tinned sheet iron. So the base is actually a sheet of iron that's sort of rolled out in Britain in the manufacturing and the growing industrial revolution in Britain. And it's tinned over to help prevent corrosion and rust and get that nice shine to it. You can see some of that tin has worn away now, and you can see some corrosion bits here and there. But what's amazing about this particular canteen is it still has its original string or cord that would be worn over the shoulder by a British soldier. The soldiers in other armies that fought in the Revolutionary War, like I said, also carried canteens. Many members of the Continental Army often carried wooden canteens that were almost like small wooden barrels. Sometimes they were made by coopers or other woodworkers that knew how to make a barrel. Sometimes the Continental Army also carried tin canteens. Perhaps they were captured from the British Army. And prior to the Revolutionary War, tin was largely imported from England because of the great tin mines in Cornwall and the west of England. But there were still some stores of tin in America. So sometimes they were making tin canteens for American troops as well. So really neat example of an enlisted man, ordinary soldier's object that was so essential to keeping soldiers hydrated and healthy while on campaign. So it's amazing that this survives. So this will be on display in a case of artifacts in the exhibit that gives a cross section of the type of material and gear that soldiers in the Continental Army and soldiers in the British Army would carry. So you'll see cartridge boxes or cartridge pouches that carried ammunition. You'll see muskets. You'll see different types of canteens. That'll be a really neat display to give you a sense of what soldiers carried on campaign. Now, some of the most ornate and interesting artifacts in Don Troiani's collection are the artifacts that are connected to the German troops that served alongside the British Army during the Revolutionary War here in America. King George hired and basically rented armies from the different princes of different German principalities, because at this time Germany wasn't unified as a nation. It was multiple principalities in what is now Germany, and so King George III was related to many of those princes, and actually rented armies from these princes in order to supplement the British Army in its service in America to try and squash the rebellion in America. And so thousands of German soldiers from places like Hesse Castle and Brunswick and Hesse-Hanau sailed from Germany across the Atlantic and fought here in America. Many of them arriving for the initial campaigns around New York City in 1776. And thousands more also came as part of an invasion down from Canada that was led by British General John Burgoyne, who I mentioned earlier. That's the Saratoga campaign. And most of the German soldiers that participated in the Saratoga campaign, about just over 3,000 officers and soldiers, were from the Principality of Brunswick and what is today northern Germany. And the sword you're looking at in front of me here is a broadsword that was carried by an officer in the Brunswick Dragoons. And Dragoons were a type of soldier that could fight and was armed to fight on both horseback and on foot. Now, the Brunswick Dragoon Regiment Prince Ludwig, they were with Burgoyne's army during the Saratoga campaign, and they were actually armed and ready to fight on horseback, but due to lack of horses, they actually just were ordered to fight on foot during this campaign. And they were armed with these long broadswords that were really, really wonderful for defending yourself on horseback, but were pretty cumbersome when marching and when fighting in battle on foot. But at the Battle of Bennington, which the anniversary was yesterday, August 16th, 1777, the Dragoon Regiment Prince Ludwig met a major defeat at that battle. But they proudly carried these broadswords and fought for their lives at the Battle of Bennington, carrying broadswords very similar to this one. A number of the broadswords that were captured at the Battle of Bennington, they were captured by American militiamen, especially from what is now the state of Vermont. These broadswords actually were reissued to the Continental Army's 2nd Light Dragoons, so reusing captured material for the American Army. And if you look closely at this sword, you can see that it has 2 interlocking C's. You see that there? I could turn it there so you can see it a little bit better. And also a crown. These interlocking C's stand for Karl I, who was the Duke of Brunswick. They're prince that they served. And just like the British Grenadier cap we looked at earlier that had GR on it for King George III, this has the crest or the emblem of their Duke, Karl I. So really a neat example. And this is actually a broadsword that was carried by an officer. And the reason we know that is because it's actually the hilt, which is the part that's right here, covering and guarding the grip of the sword, is gilt brass. So it's gold covered brass. And you can see some of the gold that's still remaining there. And this is a signal that this was carried by an officer. The enlisted man's model of this type of broadsword would have just been a brass hilt without the gilding. So a little step up there for a Brunswick officer. And over here, we also have some really interesting examples of Brunswick and a Hesse Castle connected artifacts. So let's look at this gorget here on my right. And so you can see here, this is another piece that would have been worn by an officer. This is a gorget. And a gorget was largely a symbolic piece of armor, really, that an officer wore in battle often. It's a symbol of their rank. It's a sort of one of the last remaining pieces of armor that a soldier would wear in this period, stemming from medieval days of full suits of armor. Gorget, that term is a French term. It comes from the French word for throat. So this is originally a throat protector, but by this point in the 18th century, this is largely symbolic or a sign of an officer's rank. And so a gorget like this one is worn by an officer. This one's made out of silver with gold elements here, such as the crown. This also has a painted enamel central device here with a white prancing horse of Hanover. And as I said, this was worn by a Brunswick officer. And this gorget and the broadsword that we just took a look at are both featured in Don Troiani's painting of the Battle of Bennington. You can see them clearly worn by the commander of the Brunswick Prince Ludwig Dragoon Regiment, Friedrich Baum. You can see this gorget in action in the painting. The paintings that Don creates really bring these objects to life, and we can get a greater understanding of how these artifacts are used and worn by officers and soldiers. And so they really kind of bring these things to life and they give us new meaning for these objects. Because sometimes it's hard to imagine what a gorget would have been used for or how it would have been worn. And sometimes images from the period of the Revolutionary era are hard to decipher. And they're pretty rare period images. And so Don Troiani's paintings help us to sort of reimagine and with a new vibrancy and a modern sense of what soldiers and officers and battle scenes looked like during the Revolutionary era. And so we can see a gorget in action. And so I'm going to switch this gorget out, and we're going to look at another Brunswick-related object. And that's this cartridge box plate here. This is a brass device that would have been worn on the outside flap of an ammunition pouch of a Brunswick soldier. And this particular artifact was found in the ground near a farmhouse that's very close to where the main battles of Saratoga, Freeman's Farm and Bemis Heights were fought in September and October of 1777. Don Troiani's collection is really strong in material culture like this. Artifacts like buttons and cartridge box badges and sort of bits like that, little uniform insignia. And many of them are found in the ground archaeologically. In the case of this particular cartridge box plate, this is one of only 2 of its type that still survives. Sometimes archaeology is the only way we know about some material culture from the period. And it's evidence of soldiers and their actions and where they were, where they had encampments, where they fought. In this case, we know that some of those Brunswick troops were there at that particular site, perhaps standing guard. And they were wearing these cartridge box plates on that flap of their cartridge pouches. This, again, you see the interlocking C's for Karl, the first Duke of Brunswick. You can see a crown over top of those C's here. It's pretty amazing to be able to see this up close and in person. So I encourage you to come see it in the exhibit. The next thing we're going to take a look at while we're at this close view is something not connected to Brunswick, but another one of the principalities that fought in America during the Revolutionary War. And this is a flag finial that would have gone on the staff or pole of a flag, of a regimental flag or colors that a Hessian regiment would have carried in battle. And you can see that this has FL as a cipher and a crown in its open work. This is brass. FL stands for Friedrich Landgrave, or Friedrich II, the Prince of Hesse Castle, who sent the largest contingent of troops to America to fight alongside the British Army. And Hessians, as they were popularly known and still are known today, fought at battles around New York, as I said, in 1776. But perhaps their most famous moments took place at the Battle of Trenton in December 26th, 1776, after Washington's famous crossing of the Delaware and heroic nighttime march to Trenton. About 900 Hessians were captured at the Battle of Trenton. It was one of Washington's first victories. And they captured a number of flags at that battle. You'll actually, in the exhibit, you'll get to see a piece of one of those flags that was captured at the Battle of Trenton. It's from the museum's collection. It'll be paired alongside of this flag finial from Don Troiani's collection, really bringing a sense of what those flags look like. And they'll be underneath a painting of by Don Troiani of the Battle of Trenton, which shows some of these flags in action during the moment that the commander at Trenton, the Hessian commander, Colonel Johann Rau, was mortally wounded in the middle of the battle as snow and ice fell from the sky in the crowded streets of Trenton as the Hessians tried to mount a counterattack against Washington's army. But these artifacts are sort of brought to life, as I said, in Don Troiani's paintings, and it's amazing to see them in person. It's really unusual that some of these survive, and Don Troiani's collection is really world-class in its in what it has in terms of material culture, like a British grenadier cap or an enlisted man's canteen, or personal items that bear a soldier's name, like Micah Hoyt's powder horn here. We get a sense of the personal stories of the diverse men and women who are caught up in these battles, like Molly Pitcher and Margaret Corbin. We'll have paintings on loan from various private collectors, and they have come together to bring together some really wonderful paintings to the Museum of the American Revolution. This is the first ever exhibit of Don Troiani's original Revolutionary War artwork. So it's really a can't miss opportunity. As I said, the artifacts will range in about, there will be about 40 artifacts, about 20 of those from Don Troiani's collection. And some of these you get a sense of Don's artistic process, which is very detailed and thorough. Because Don Troiani uses a bunch of techniques to get at to the interesting stories of the Revolutionary era. He engages in a lot of primary research. He digs through primary source material online and in person at various archives. He has conversations with fellow historians about their research into the life and times of the people of the Revolutionary War and their material culture. He also goes to battlefields and studies landscapes and topography. He studies historic maps to get an understanding of where soldiers were at a particular time in a battle. And so altogether, these paintings, along with the artifacts, give us a renewed sense of what the Revolutionary War really looked like almost 250 years ago. It's an era without photography that sometimes is hard to connect with. But through Don Troiani's artwork and the artifacts from his collection, we get a great sense of what life was like back then and the drama and reality of battle. And we have here on display behind me a painting of two soldiers of the British Royal Artillery. This original painting will be on loan, it is on loan from Joel Bowie, who's a private collector in Massachusetts. And you can get a sense of the detail and painstaking research that Don Troiani engages in to kind of bring the Revolutionary War to life. And so I want to open it up for some questions now from the audience. So we can answer some of your questions that you have about these materials, about the exhibit, and about Don Troiani's process and artwork. Okay, let's see. So how big are Don Troiani's paintings? Let's start with that one. They range in size. Some are 4 to 5 feet wide, 3 to 4 feet tall. So those are some of the larger battle paintings. You also see behind me the what's known as a figure study, a study of soldiers. This one is an oil on board painting. You also see smaller figure studies that Don Troiani does that are about 20 inches tall, 12 to 14 inches wide. They're often painted with watercolor and gouache on Bristol board, which is basically an artist's paper board that he paints on. And so it's a mix of oil on canvas paintings, which are generally the larger battle paintings, which are 3, 4, 5 feet wide, and then the smaller soldier studies. And there'll be about 26 of the larger oil on canvas battle paintings and about 20 of the smaller figure studies. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's see. Matt, tell us about the Baroness von Riedesel with the Brunswickers. Yes. So Baroness Friederike Riedesel was one of the hundreds of women who followed their husbands to war, specifically with the British Army and their Brunswick auxiliaries during the Saratoga campaign. But Baroness Friederike von Riedesel was a little bit different than the other camp followers, as they were known. She, as I've said, was a baroness, and her husband was a baron who commanded the Brunswick troops in Burgoyne's army. And she survived the war amazingly and wrote an account and a memoir of what it was like to serve in America. And she was part of, she was witness to some of the battles of Saratoga, had cannonballs flying over her head as she huddled in a house nearby the battlefields, tended to wounded British officers in that house. She was part of what is known as the Convention Army, the army that Burgoyne surrendered at Saratoga and was marched down to Virginia and then up to Maryland and Pennsylvania. with her husband, and then eventually made it back to Germany. And all the while throughout this campaigning, she had her young children with her and also gave birth to a child in America. So you can just, it's hard to imagine what that experience might have been like for Baroness von Riedesel. Her story is a story that we tell in our core exhibit at the museum, and we'll be telling again in this exhibit. Okay, powder horn. Okay, I want to take another look at this powder horn here. And there's a question about, is that a flag, and what flag is it, and how do we know? So let's take a look. I do see that flag that you're talking about there. It's right above the artillery piece there, that cannon. And you can see that in the canton, or upper left corner of that flag, is what looks to be the British Union. Now, it's hard to determine what precisely this flag is, but flags with the British Union were used by the New England troops during the Siege of Boston. Also, the what's known as the Great Union flag, which merged the British Union and the canton, and 13 stripes was later used by the Continental Army or the United States as a symbol of the new nation. I would guess this is probably one of the flags that a New England regiment is carrying. It could have also, it's possible that it's also a British ensign with a red field. That's a possibility as well. You can also see flags on the rear, the stern of this ship here. It's a little bit in the glare, so I'm trying to manipulate it there. You can see flags, including a pendant or pennant at the top of the mast of this flag. You can see a lot of great collection of flags on loan to the museum right now from the flag collector Jeff Bridgman. And you can also see some original Revolutionary War flags in the museum's core exhibit. There'll be one original flag in the Liberty exhibit as well, the flag of the 9th Virginia Regiment. It'll be displayed during near Don Troiani's Battle of Trenton painting, because there were a number of Virginia regiments that served at that battle. All right, another question. Has Don Troiani painted Valley Forge or Morristown, New Jersey? Not that I'm aware of. I don't think he's done any Valley Forge scenes, though he's done hundreds and hundreds of paintings of the Revolutionary War. And he's had, throughout different stages in his career, he's had commissions from all over the place. He did a number of works for the National Park Service during the bicentennial. So there's a chance he might have done a Valley Forge or Morristown painting during that time period. I haven't seen those personally, but it's possible he may have done one then. And then, who was Molly Pitcher, and what is in the exhibit related to her? So the painting that I showed on screen earlier shows the woman that became known as Molly Pitcher at the Battle of Monmouth on June 28, 1778. She was a camp follower from Pennsylvania who followed the Continental Army on its march through New Jersey as it evacuated the Valley Forge encampment in 1778, following the British as the British tried to consolidate their forces in New York City. And at the Battle of Monmouth, which was one of the largest battles of the war, her husband, who was part of Proctor's artillery regiment, was firing their cannons, and her husband fell wounded, and she took up her husband's position at the gun and attended to the cannon that day. And that name, Molly Pitcher, her real name was Mary Hayes. That name, Molly Pitcher, is sort of the mythological name for her, but it's possible that it's likely that she carried water during the battle, likely water used to tend to that cannon. So she probably carried water in a bucket that day to wet the sponge to insert into the cannon to put out any remaining sparks after the gun had been fired. But Molly Pitcher was one of 3 women to receive a pension for her services rendered during the Revolutionary War. Her pension came from the government of Pennsylvania after the governor heard her story. she had later, she had remarried and settled in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, in central Pennsylvania, and died in 1832. But she received a pension for her heroic action. And she's one of the famous New Jersey actions in New Jersey's history now. If you drive along the New Jersey Turnpike, you'll encounter Molly Pitcher Rest Area on the Turnpike. So there's a lot of different things named after Molly Pitcher nowadays. But she was a real person who fought at the Battle of Monmouth. All right, what inspired Don to become a painter and ultimately illustrate military scenes? And has he been to the museum before? And will he come to the exhibit? So Don Troiani's interest in history and collecting really runs deep. His mother was a collector and dealer of antiques. He was very interested in that. He's often interested in drawing. His father was an artist. And so he was really interested in drawing as a boy. And he studied at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts here in Philadelphia in the 1960s, the late 1960s. And also he studied in New York City. And so as a young painter, he was really interested in painting realistic scenes. And he's done hundreds and hundreds of paintings of the Civil War, when some of the major anniversaries of the battles of the Civil War were taking place in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And so his works really range in scope from America, some of the early colonial conflicts in America, the French and Indian War, the Revolutionary War, War of 1812, and the Civil War. And he is really inspired by some of the French military artists of the 1800s, including Edouard de Taille, who became famous for his very technical drawings of French soldiers of the mid to late 1800s. He also has some inspiration from a local artist, William Trago, whose most famous Revolutionary War work was the March to Valley Forge we own here at the Museum of the American Revolution. You can see on display in our core exhibit. And so he has drawn inspiration from all over the place, even across the Atlantic. And Don Troiani really prides himself on being very realistic in his work, paying attention to details. And sometimes the material culture that Don Troiani paints doesn't necessarily survive. So it's only based on descriptions based in written sources and primary sources. And so Don's paintings sort of resurrect those descriptions and bring them to life in a painting to see what a uniform looked like, even though we only have a written description of that uniform from the period. And yes, Don Troiani has been to the museum a number of times. He has also lent some of his artifacts to the museum before this exhibit. And Don will be back at the museum for the opening events of the exhibit. In particular, he'll be here for the member preview on Friday, October 15th. He'll be here signing books along with myself. As I said, the catalog for the exhibit captures the paintings that will be in the exhibit and also the artifacts. And it's available for pre-order now through the museum's shop. And you can also pick up a copy of the book on the day of the member preview, October 15th, and have it signed by Don. So that'll be a great opportunity. And so could you show some more paintings? We could perhaps go back to the PowerPoint if you'd like to see some of the paintings up close, including ones that I skipped. But if not, we can go. I'm being told we'll skip that for now. But you'll have to come to the exhibit. We'll be having some more images of paintings on our website. You'll be able to see them in the catalog. And for those of you that are interested in learning more about the exhibit, but perhaps can't visit, I definitely suggest that you pick up a copy of the book and pre-order a copy. You can, when you pre-order that book, you can select to have the book picked up at the museum instead of having it shipped to your home if you'd like, and it could be signed. We can try and arrange for it to have it signed either at the member preview on the 15th or at another time. So we can try for that. And so let us know if you want to put a note in your order that you'd like to have it signed. We may be able to accommodate that for our members. Let's see, any other questions? But I think that's it. So I think we'll conclude there. But I really appreciate you all joining me this evening for a sneak peek at some of the artifacts that will be in Liberty, Don Troiani's Paintings of the Revolutionary War, opening on October 16th, 2021 here at the Museum of the American Revolution. And with that, again, I'm Matthew Skic, Curator of Exhibitions, and I hope to see you at the museum in the near future. Thank you for joining us.